So, how sensitive should you be to other people's feelings, to other people just doings, walking, going ons? And it's so interesting because today I was getting a cup of coffee. I was at my synagogue in the morning and I was getting a cup of coffee before our prayers. And there was a kid there. And the kid was probably about 12 years old and he was making a little hot cocoa. And he was in front of me and he was making hot cocoa. And then all of a sudden I saw him go grab the milk and he went to go grab the milk and he went to pour milk into his hot cocoa. And I saw him that he didn't take it out, or he like picked it up, he put it right back in the fridge, and then he closed the door and like ran upstairs to go pray. And what was interesting to me is that when I went to go get the milk, because I wanted some milk for my coffee, there was only a little bit left, and I was trying to think like, this kid is a very special kid. He had the thought to say, hey, I need milk, but there's somebody else who also going to need milk, and I'm willing to like take a back seat, sacrifice my milk for my hot cocoa in order to allow them to take it. Whether he was thinking that, or maybe he was thinking like, hey, once I finish the milk, I don't want to have to go get a new one, or maybe he's thinking something else. But it seemed like he didn't take the milk because he knew that I was going to want milk, and if he would have taken it, there would not have been enough for me. And I thought that was amazing. I actually saw his father a couple of minutes later, and I'm like, dude, your kid is very special. And he's like, no, don't tell me. But I'll tell my wife and everything like that. So it was a moment that really struck me, because I think at the same time there's not so many people who necessarily think about others like that. For example, like if you're going in, I always, I don't know why I always do this, but whenever I'm walking into a building, into a room or something, and there's a door there, I always watch to see who are the people who not just hold the door open for the people behind them, but who look back to see if there's somebody behind them to open the door for. And there's a difference, because if like a bunch of people walking in, then yes, most people will hold the door open for the person behind them. But let's say there's somebody who's like, let's say 10 feet behind you, or the awkward like 15 to 20 feet behind you, and you don't know if you should or shouldn't hold the door open for them. So let's say somebody's like 10 feet behind you, and they're like, it just literally costs you a second or 2 seconds of your time to hold the door open for them. So are you going to do it? Are you not going to do it? And I think what's even more impressive are the people who look back to see if there's anybody there, meaning they're looking for the opportunity to give to others, the other opportunity to be sensitive. And I remember one time I was at I think I was in school somewhere, and we were having an assembly, and there weren't enough chairs, and we had to go to another room to get more chairs to come in. So everybody who didn't have a chair had to bring more chairs in. And one of the teachers there said, everybody should bring a chair in for somebody else. Meaning, we all needed chairs. Let's all bring in a chair for somebody else. And it was the same action of us bringing in the chairs. It was the same action of picking up a chair, bringing it into a room, putting it down, and sitting down. But the fact that we were doing it for somebody else, so like everybody was able to get somebody else a chair, added such a beautiful aspect of like, we're doing that anyway, but I'm going to do it for you, and you do it for me. And I thought that was so incredible, and it built such a sensitivity to other people's feelings, other people's just whatever it is that they're going to be doing. And I found it fascinating that there are people out there, a lot of people, maybe not as many as there should be, but there are a bunch of people out there who have this ability to really just see what other people need. You know, those like friends who just give you a call like, oh, I saw the other day, you didn't look so great. Is everything okay? Or you get a text randomly and it's somebody just checking in on you, and it's like happens to be like the best time. And I think it's really important to understand that just like we would love that, just like we would need that, just like sometimes we need a pick-me-upper, other people need that also. Everybody needs it. You think everybody even the people you think have made it, like have not made it, and they also need those times. And if we can start to understand that for ourselves, that hey, you know what, I'm trying to do something here. I'm trying to step up my game. I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z. And what I really need to do is really need to take this thing and see how I can help other people and look out for other people. That could be something that could be really life-changing. And I'm so impressed by these parents of this one kid who somehow taught their kid, who's like 12, he's literally only 12 years old. How does he know that? Like, how does he know what to think about other people? And I think it definitely stems from parents. I think it definitely comes from other people that you see who are doing those types of things, the conversations that they're having. It's like, hey, do you mind helping so-and-so? People who volunteer. And I think it's really something beautiful. And it's something that I look up to. It's something that I want to try to definitely work on myself more, just because it's so impressive if we could just look to see how we can help other people. And I think there's another side of the coin, which we'll talk about in a second, in terms of like, let's say somebody is too sensitive. They're overly sensitive in terms of the sensitivity aspect, meaning we're not the sensitive when somebody else is being too sensitive. And how does it we can deal with that? So we'll talk about it in a second. But what I do think what we need to understand is number one is if we could try to be a giver, more of a giver than we are now, then I think that could be something that could be really, really helpful for us. And I think if we have that ability to start to say, hey, what does somebody else need? And sometimes it doesn't even cost you anything. It doesn't cost you money, it doesn't cost you time. Maybe it costs you like a smile or something like that, right? So we have to understand that where is it that I can give to somebody else? And if you're walking in the supermarket, the cashier just might want you to say, just be friendly. And how many times have you said hi to the cashier and they were like surprised? Like, why is somebody surprised when somebody says hi to them? And it's because they probably just have nobody who is being nice to them. They're just thinking like they're just another person. And it's interesting because there's so much opportunity if you're in tune with it. And this is what we talk about in the classes that I give and the students that I work with when we speak about this idea of like abundant mindset, that there's so many opportunities all around us. And the same goes true with just giving and doing nice deeds. And there's so much opportunity for us to be able to really take on certain things that are going to be happening in our lives. And if we can start to just recognize that, if we can start to say to ourselves, hey, you know what? I have the ability to become more. I have the ability to look out for others and to give to others. That could be something that could be really life-changing, because the amount of giving you're going to be able to do is going to be incredible. You're probably going to think to yourself like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like for me to hold the door open for somebody, it's not a big deal. And maybe it's not such a big deal, but the character that it builds is a big deal. You become a person who is a giver. Just like if you want to become a more patient person, you just have to just practice the act of being more patient. So same thing with being a giver. You practice the act of giving more, you end up becoming a giver. And it's something that is really, really powerful that I think a lot of people can do. And I think another aspect of it is it's not about winning or losing necessarily. It's really just about the fact of just doing for others. So many times, even like this kid today, like he was there first. He had all the right to take the milk. He got there first. And it wasn't about him getting the milk versus me getting the milk. It was just like, oh, somebody else is going to need the milk. I'll take a step back. And that was something that I think was so powerful. And so many times, if we can start to understand that, I think that could be something that could shift a lot for a lot of people. And not just for you, the person who's doing the giving, but for the people that you're going to be giving to. And I think if we could start to switch that, then I think a lot of things could be very different in our own personal lives. So now you might be saying to yourself, okay, what's the other side of the coin? What's this other aspect of trying to be sensitive to other people? That if somebody who we know is just a very sensitive soul. So first of all, everybody's sensitive to certain things. And different things trigger different people, and everybody has their triggers. So maybe for some people it's impatience of waiting online. For some people it's the college that they went to or they didn't go to, whatever it is, or certain I don't know, dating could be a big trigger for people. Like everyone has their thing that like if you bring up, they like could freak out, and we all have them, and we all got to work on that. But the question is like, so if we know that about other people, is it right to bring up those topics, not in an attacking way? Not in a necessarily attacking way, because I think if you're attacking the person, if you're trying to trigger them on purpose, then I think that's a thing you need to work on. And I think there's a way. So because let's say you're in the type of relationship where you need to help teach them, let's say a parent or maybe even a teacher or a coach or something like that. I think there's certain opportunities that you have that you need to say those things, even if it's hard for them to say. And I think the way you could do it in that situation is really just start to ask for permission. And you don't need to ask permission like, hey, can I tell you something about dating? But it's like, hey, I have something in my mind. Would you be open to hearing more about it? Like, are you in this state to like talk about something like this? And more come from a place of curiosity and really just caring about the person. And if you can do that, that could be like huge. That could be such a life changer in terms of like the steps that you're going to want to get. And if you could start to do that, then all of a sudden things can really start to change. So just understanding that number one is going to be really important. That everybody has their triggers, and there's certain ways you can, and certain times like you shouldn't be doing it. And I think if we can start to recognize that, that can be something that can be really beneficial. Let's say somebody though, you don't really know their situation. You don't know like what triggers them or not triggers them. But like I don't know, something like politics. Like a lot of people just can't stand it. A lot of people love it. A lot of people hate it. And if we could start to say, hey, to ourselves, like should we or should we not bring this thing up? So perhaps play it on the safe side. Like why does it matter? So if it's something that actually it's going to make a big difference, and it's a really important subject and topic, and it's something that regardless, like it needs to be said or needs to be spoken about. Okay, so then you could like start to speak about it, and especially in a permissive way and in a safe way. But if it's something that's not going to add any value, if it's like, oh, remember that time in high school when you did X, Y, and Z, and like it's really just not anything. So then all of a sudden, like you're not adding any value. Like, is this going to add value or just make somebody just feel triggered and annoyed? And if we could start to understand that, I think that could also be a good guideline for us, whether it is we should start to take or say those certain things that we're supposed to be doing. And maybe it's just really, maybe it's nothing to do with saying. Maybe it's, I don't know, I sit in a certain seat. I know somebody gets upset whenever I sit in the seat or something like that. And on the one hand, it's, you could just say, well, it's just a seat. It doesn't really matter. But sometimes, like, well, if it really annoys that person, like, why do it? Like, do you have to teach them a lesson? Is that the best way to teach them a lesson? Most of the time, it's not. And I think even with parenting nowadays, parents like love teaching kids lessons. They love like showing their power. And all that does is just really just push the kid further away. And the next time they're only going to do it. Doesn't mean you can't have repercussions. It doesn't mean you can't punish your children, and it doesn't mean this and that. But just make sure it's like a fair punishment. Don't just do it for the sake of like proving a point. If you're proving a point, then it's coming from the wrong place. I think that is something that's really powerful. And I think going back to like the joke part, I think a lot of people end up making jokes about other people or saying jokes or talking about certain things that you're going to just upset the person. And maybe they're being too sensitive. They can't handle a joke. But if they can't, then why are you doing it? Or if you see that they start getting uncomfortable or whatever it is, then don't do it. Like I have certain friends who would make jokes about others, and then like my friends would just laugh. But then like later on, I would ask them like, "Didn't that annoy you?" He's like, "Yeah, but like, what am I going to do? They're just like being annoying." And I'm like, "That's so sad that he has to go through an abuse and he has to sort of ignore the fact or laugh along with the joke, even though like he doesn't really like it." And I think that's something that doesn't have to happen. I think in the guy circle it happens a lot. But if we could start to say, hey, you know what, maybe I'll just be a little bit more sensitive. This person doesn't like when I talk about it or do something like this, then I'm not going to do it. And I think another area that it could really happen is in certain conversations that you're going to have. Certain people like being more, I don't know, they like talking about certain things, and other people don't like talking about certain things, going back to the politics thing. So that people don't like the politics, then don't bring it up. Like there's literally no value that's going to happen from that. You could ask them their opinion. You could say, hey, what about X, Y, and Z? That's fine. But at the end of the day, like if you're going to be doing something like this, like it could be really beneficial for you just to make sure, just shut the yapper. Like it's just not going to have any value to the conversation that you're going to be having. So making sure that you can do that could be something that could also be very, very beneficial. But let's say you have somebody who is just an overly sensitive person. That no matter what you talk about, no matter what you say, they're going to get upset. They're going to get annoyed. They have, I don't know, they're always going to have a negative opinion about something. And doesn't matter. I know a couple of these types of people. Like at the end of the day, like you have to understand that it's not you, it's them. And I think that's like hard because on the one hand, we don't want to upset anybody, but at the same time, like if we want to have a conversation with them, like we have to say something, even though like they're going to get upset about literally whatever it is that you're going to say. And I think if we can start to understand that, if we can start to say to ourselves, okay, I'm going to have this conversation, they're going to get upset, but it has nothing to do with me. It all has to do with them. Like that's a big thing. And I think a lot of times, even when somebody does something wrong and you go and then they go and they apologize. So let's say I did something wrong to somebody and I went over and then I apologized and I admitted that I did something wrong and it really messed up. And they're like, okay, I just need a few more days. And then like, even after a few more days we give them, and like, I say, okay, like I really apologize, da, da, da. And they're like, well, I just can't like handle it. Like, I don't know if I want to be your friend anymore, or I'm still upset. At the end of it, like that's on them. Right. If you're really being really sincere about it and you're okay and you're the one who acknowledged that maybe something happened that was wrong and they're still upset about it, like they're the ones who are gonna have to figure that out. I think it happens a lot with like different relationships that people have, whether it's friends, parents, siblings, whatever it is. But if we can start to recognize and acknowledge for ourselves that there are certain times where we can't control other people's feelings. We can't control other people's way that they react and how they're going to be emotional. If somebody can't let go of something for years, like that's on them and that's nothing to do with you. And it's hard because you're like, well, I sort of did something, but you also tried to fix it or try to have a conversation about it. Some people don't even want to talk about it to be able to fix it. I have I had a client of mine who had a very I don't know if it's an ugly breakup or just a breakup, and all breakups are like sort of ugly. And he wanted to like just talk about it, and like she just was very, very closed to it, and she needed her time and this and that, and that's great. But at the same time, like at the end of he's being affected by it, but he also can't control her, and he can't like force her to be on like a phone calls, you know what I mean? So it's like really just understanding that there could be a time and place for it. And sometimes people are just not ready for it. And if we could start to just recognize that, I think that could be something that could be really helpful. I think there are a lot of sensitive people out there, and a lot of them are just going to get upset. They're going to get triggered. They're going to do all the things that they're going to do, regardless of how you say it or what you say. And that's on them. And even if you say something that maybe is a little whatever, and you just didn't know, so like, okay, so like you didn't know. And I know for next time, and just don't do it again, right? So I think those are two different areas that we can start to work on. So number one is for our own personal sensitivity to others in terms of how we can look to give and see other people, recognize other people. If you see somebody's garbage can rolling in the street, perhaps that person doesn't want their garbage can to get run over by a car, or for the car's sake, like they might not want to run into a garbage can that like blows into the street. So just recognize, hey, maybe I could go help that. It's just being sensitive to somebody drops something, somebody falls on the floor, let's pick it up. There's a piece of garbage on the floor. Like, are you going to pick it up? And these are all so many different areas that we just pass by throughout our days. And if we could start to recognize that, I think that can be something really beneficial. And on the other hand, how is it we can hold ourselves back from saying certain things if we know it's going to be sensitive to other people, as well as perhaps other people getting too sensitive, and it's not on us, that's really on them, and we shouldn't take offense to it. So I'm sure there are a lot of techniques that you could try to do. You could definitely scratch a CD with that bad boy. If you know what I'm talking about, then I'll talk about it another time. But really understand that there are certain things that you can do to not get offended, not get upset, and you can just really make those things happen. All right. So if anybody has any questions, like always, feel free to reach out. Make sure to subscribe if you are on YouTube. Make sure to follow if you are listening to the podcast. And we'll see everybody on the next one, and take a look at all our free, cool resources we have in the description down below. Peace out.